Roland.
Hey Janet, how you doing?
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to be here in this place
Yeah,
again.
ready for another good conversation today.
Yeah, yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I really do.
I want to say hi to everybody else who's joined us. And as we talk today, I just kind of notice the thoughts that are rising in you, the feelings that are rising in you, and have a conversation with one another about what these ideas sound like to you and how it fits for your life. And again, as we've said multiple times, there are no right or wrong answers. That this is a conversation in which we're growing together and learning from one another. And so that's what we're going to do today as we talk about this is the last chapter of this section
Hmm.
for us.
Yeah, yeah. And we're going to take a week's break after we've done this section, but we were so excited to get into it. I love
Yeah.
how he makes the connection from what we were looking at last time that we were together. Um, the idea of being formed in the image of Christ, and then this natural flow into how that relates to others. And there's a lot to unpack in this conceptually. Maybe it's even one of the more difficult parts to actually get our head around. There's an illusionary factor when we pull love for others into this place. It very easily goes into the doing space. It goes into the defensive space. It goes into the objectifying space if we don't get our head around it well. And so I'm excited about getting into this
I
chapter and unpacking. I think there's a lot of good stuff here.
think so too. I love that he connects spiritual formation, that it's just not about us individually, but it is about us in community and relationally, right? And if we're created in the image of a God who is relational, it only makes sense that as we move to become more in the image of Christ, that we would
Mm,
become more relational, right?
right. And going back to an illustration that we looked at briefly last week, the idea of standing on a stage, that in fact shame becomes the stage upon which we are sharing, standing, causing us to be something other than our authentic self in order to be accepted and received. And God is inviting us to come off the stage. Um, Thinking about that connection and this idea of relating to others, it does seem to me that the thing that shame wants us to do in relationships, even when we acknowledge how good they are and how right they are, is we see relationships essentially as an avenue to one or two things, and that is that loving others is a means to feeling valued in myself. And so I am going to try and feel valued in myself. If I love others, I will be effectively loved. It's that win friends and influence people kind of concept.
If I
Uh,
do all these things for other people, then that means I'm a good person and they're
right.
going to think they love me, right?
They'll value me and I'll value myself. So this is loving others is a means to address that issue of worth. And uh, that's not lacking in a sense of rational process, because we've just talked all about how we're discovering our authentic self and how valuable we are. And then we talk about loving others. It seems like a vehicle to get to loving us. And because we see loving us ourselves in the issues of worth, that all makes sense. This is the
Right.
beauty of this chapter. It shifts it. The other way that we can see loving others is in that process that we again talked about last time together, that actually being a good Christian is about annihilating our sense of self. It's almost this Buddhist tradition. I actually, an identity doesn't exist anymore. I entirely function in the space where I don't exist.
Yeah.
And I'm doing everything because I'm a vehicle for other people's benefit or God's benefit, which is equally devaluing. And so
That
it
idea
takes on
that
those two extremes.
I have to become less so you can be more,
Right,
right?
right.
But
Yeah,
it's just the counter of what shame will often do, where we try to make ourselves more by
mhm,
making the other person less. Then when we
exactly.
say, well, we're loving people, we reverse that. I'm going to make you more, but that means I have to be less.
Yeah.
Right?
And the beauty of that is it makes perfect sense, but it's not something I want to go to. When we're experiencing this urge to validate ourselves, and perhaps it even transcends our objective analysis, but we're doing it by slightly putting the other person down, slightly putting the other person down. The people that we love around us are there as part of our stage to feel good about ourselves, and we're demeaning them because we feel better in ourselves, even though we may not recognize that's what's going on. Um, uh, when we think about loving others in this way that we step down and put them up, what happens when we do that is that as they become authentically themselves, they are responding to us in exactly the same way. So we create this space where we are actually affirmed, but it begins with the willingness to actually, in a healthy way, not a dysfunctional way, say, I am not going to focus on my desire to feel valued. I'm going to focus on your need to feel valued so that you'll experience love and worth. And we can do that
Right.
dysfunctionally too. And those are some of the pitfalls we have to um, avoid, which is part of the discipleship conversation, right? We're working out how to do this thing effectively. But it is a priority that love always includes an other. There's always an object
Yes.
to our love. Relation love is only relational. We see that in the Trinity. The
Hmm.
Trinity is about love. Um, but it involves an other. We can't live in this world without an other to love. Sometimes that other is actually ourselves. We love ourselves objectively, but we see it most often in the way we relate to each other, communicating
Right.
worth to each other. So that's where this chapter comes in a really, really valuable way.
But it's just so threatening sometimes to communicate the worth of another, right? It's almost when you're struggling with who you are and if you're valuable, for me to say to this other person, you matter, you have this strength, you have this gift, you're valuable. It's almost like it reflects back on me, and what I feel is that no, I'm not, right?
Exactly.
And so I think a
Exactly.
lot of times the way that we manage that is our defense mechanisms, our dysfunction. But what they end up doing is they end up controlling relationships
Right.
or trying to control the person or control the image of the person or control our image in that relationship, which is not a real relationship, right?
Precisely right. Anytime there is control involved, as opposed to support, um, um, advice, mentoring, whatever, all of those. Anytime there's actual control, I am going to control your behavior, whatever the device is we use. That we aren't loving. Control does not communicate worth; it communicates diminishment, and that's a really hard thing to start to wrestle with. It certainly was for me.
And
Um,
even if it's control of the image or the way that you see yourself, right?
right. Yeah, absolutely. The goal of love is to communicate the authentic self. And so it's a really good discipline to get into, to actually keep looking for the authentic self in the other all the time and then affirm that.
Right.
It's not a manipulation thing. It's about actually in the middle of all of this, there's who you really are. I'm going to point that back to you. And it is amazing to me how healing and powerful it is to actually do that with people. To make that a habit of life it has amazing impact.
It does, but it's hard. It's hard,
Really
right?
hard.
I think that that's one of those things that to some degree we've had to experience that ourselves in order to be able to do that for other people, right?
Which
And
brings us back
until
to the role of the church.
it brings us back to the role of the church, right? And that we would hope people who are further along on the journey would be able to come alongside
Yes,
people and do that for them, right?
do that rather than see them as needs of propping them, uh, items that can prop up their own desire for worth. Yeah.
Right. And Roland, I would say that this is actually one of the things that you've done for me. I've been in a discipleship relationship with someone where they weren't able to do this. And I met you not long after that in pretty broken state and dealing with a lot of shame. And you were able, in the midst of all of my dysfunction, to not see the dysfunction, but to respond to who I am in Christ. And it's been transformational for me. And yeah, and it's just convinced me even more that this is what the church is supposed to be.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
for that. I appreciate you articulating that. But here's the wonderful thing about that. You say that, and immediately there rises in me. First of all, what rises in me is I am a valuable person, and that process we've been through is valuable. The second thing that rises in me is the fact that I wasn't delusional in that. I didn't try and find something that might be considered valuable in you and try and get you to conform to that. Um, I, from the very beginning, and it's only ever been increasing, saw who I think you really are, and as it's gone on, and I know it's who you really are. The love that has shaped you, the person that Christ is has created you to be and that you are becoming. And so there is this real joy in that journey that we would have a conversation and I would walk away. And sometimes I think, I wonder if Janet really heard what I said at that point in time. Um, but this deep desire rising within me to have you actually experience who you are as we've journeyed together. And then that actually in that same process becoming identical for me as in the things that you just articulated that this is and actually the model we're talking about. That's it's not that we manipulate or do that, it's just what happens.
Just what happens. And it's amazing
Yeah.
just loving people, right? And seeing them for who they really are.
Think if I'm going to be honest, the thing that I love the most about my journey with Christ is in that area. God helped me early on in this process to see how to do that and how to develop that. And I love it. I can have a conversation with somebody and pretty quickly pick up on the clues that is actually their authentic self and affirm that. And the response is always wonderful. And I just thank God for that journey in my own life that is come to that place. But I don't think that that's odd or not normal. I think that's the transformational place that the church is supposed to be in. And again, it speaks to the journey of New Start worldview that we're trying to help each other be those people. And if we can give our lives to creating authenticity, or allowing access to authenticity for others, what a wonderful thing to give your life to. And it is the
Yeah,
church. It's the dream of the church. It makes it
right.
wonderful.
But as long as we ask one another to wear masks, we're
Yeah,
never going to be that kind of church, right?
exactly. And it is what the
Um,
church does. When we moralize holiness,
yeah,
if we're all about rule obeying or even procedure obeying or ways that we've done things or who has the keys or whatever, um, we aren't being the church. And
yeah,
praise God that somehow in the middle of all of that, he still keeps building his church because that was his promise. But many times I look at it and I think it's in spite of us, not because of us.
right.
And I, my journey has been I want the church to be that. I want to be a part of a church that is that. And that's again what I love about my journey. But I love the way that this environment's coming together for us because I get to be a part of a church that is genuinely that. It's wonderful, wonderful.
Exciting, really is
And if people are
a good
watching
thing.
this video from another church context, which we hope would happen, have a look at the dynamics of your church and where it is that. Find ways of affirming that and building that up and adding more of that to the life of the church because that is who we're supposed to be.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Oh, it's a good word, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
exciting.
And in the end, it takes us back to why shame keeps coming up, and because it comes up, I said it last week, but it's worth saying again because it does come up an awful lot. It feels like our focus is shame. Our focus is
Right.
not shame. Our focus is love and received and given as worth. That's the focus of our journey. It's the love of God transforming us so that we might be more loving. But we continuously bump up against the struggle, the platform, the stage upon which we're performing, and stepping out of that stage is terrifying for us.
Right.
Um, but it is what stops us from loving well. It is our shame. Shame is the thing that drives the wedge into relationships. And when a relationship is broken, shame escalates um, exponentially. So, shame will be the reason that a relationship breaks. And when it breaks, shame will dominate that space until we find healing from that. And it's an amazing struggle, but it's a struggle we have the capacity to overcome. God has gifted us all that we need to live free of that shame cycle. Not
Hmm.
not without referencing the desire to keep getting back up on the stage. That's going to be there, but He has given us the capacity to live lives that are free of that domination.
He really has. He really has. As you were speaking, I was just thinking about a performance that's done on the stage, and you have, people on the stage interacting with one another, and you know that that's not a real relationship because they're playing a role, right? And so
That
even if it looks loving, even if it looks
yeah,
right, like friendship, it's
yes,
not because they're playing a role.
right, and it
And
might even evoke in your feelings. Oh, I want that, but
right, right,
it's
right.
still a role.
It's still a role because
Yeah.
that's not their real selves. And it's
Yes.
only when we take off the mask and we step out of the role that we can have not only be our authentic self, but have authentic relationships where we're really known and seen
And that
and loved.
does, yeah, exactly. And that does speak to, again, the definition of discipleship that we have spoken to before. But it's really, really important for us to be able to, and maybe we need to spend some time actually getting the words together that effectively does this. But discipleship, which is the church, is about healing us, journeying together to find in Christ healing from that which in us is broken and affirming in one another's lives that which is authentically who we are intended to be. That's discipleship. That's the journey
Right.
that we're on. That's the mandate of the church, and it's the magnificence of being the church. But so often it's not that. We're not that. And so then you have to question is what we know as the church, is that actually the church? Or does the church exist within the church in spite of us, but because of the grace of God? I
Right.
think that's true. I think that's what happens.
Well, probably. Probably.
Well,
Oh,
yeah. Have you got anything to add to that as we wrap this little piece up?
well, I not nothing much. I'm just thinking about how great it would be, right, to see a church where people are real with one another and they love one another and they're able to not, can you say this, not react defensively to other people's dysfunction, right? But that they're able to love in the midst of the dysfunction and just what could happen in people's lives if they could experience that. I'm just thinking about that and
That's
how
beautiful.
transformational that would be for us.
I wonder if that can inform the conversation that's going to happen as we close off. That the next that this conversation that now evokes from this place might be rested in what it is to be the church, what it is to help others be their authentic selves, what love really looks like, and how it can be distorted. How about we just have that conversation about the ideal of love, the ideal of affirmation, the ideal of discipleship. Well, thanks, Janet. Really appreciate this first part of this
Likewise.
journey, and have loved where we've gotten to in this. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful picture, and let's be
It's,
that church for each other and for all that we're engaged in working with. It's going to be wonderful.
yes. Yes. I'm in. Count me in.
Fantastic. We'll do that. Thanks, Janet. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Robert.
much. It's a great journey. Love you. Talk to you later. Bye bye.
Bye bye.